Hi guys, welcome back. At the end of a jury hearing, both attorneys and the judge get together to agree on a set of instructions that walk the jury step by step through what they need to consider to decide your case. The allegations are this, and here's what the plaintiff has to prove in order to prevail on those allegations. And here's what you guys need to consider to decide if they've done that. And I recently discovered that all federal circuits have a set of sample jury instructions, not just for discrimination cases, but for all civil cases. Those jury instructions are usually written by attorneys for lay people, so they lay out the law accurately in a way that just about anybody should be able to understand. If you're headed into federal court, or even if you're just working your way through the EEOC process, then understanding how the jury is going to think about your case could come in really handy. Every circuit interprets the law a little differently, and they lay out their instructions a little differently, so there are going to be differences from circuit to circuit. Of course, the sample instructions that are going to matter most to you are the ones for your circuit. And in the description, I've linked to an index of all the sample instructions that are currently available, so you can easily find yours. Now, like I said, these instructions apply to all civil cases. So up front, you're going to find some general instructions. They talk the jury through things like how to assess the credibility of witnesses, how to evaluate the evidence, and so on. Knowing how a jury is going to do those things can also be useful. Now, of course, the instructions that are going to be most useful are the ones that apply to your specific type of case. The table of contents will show you which sections those are for you, and most circuits will even include direct links from the table of contents to each section. Because these are sample instructions, they're templates, so reading them may require a little bit of a learning curve. How steep that learning curve is going to vary a little from circuit to circuit. My case would have been filed in the 11th Circuit. Checking the table of contents, here are some of the general instructions I mentioned for things like evaluating witness credibility and so forth. And using my failure to accommodate claim as an example, we see that's covered in section 4.12. In the beginning of that section, we find the prima facie elements for a failure to accommodate claim. We're the plaintiff, our employer is the defendant, so this is simple enough. But it can get a little tougher to read through the template when we dig into some of the finer points. For instance, here's one when the employee has asked for a non-essential job duty to be assigned to someone else as a reasonable accommodation, like when I asked my boss to have someone else flip her PowerPoint charts when I needed to be in the restroom. Here's how a jury in the 11th Circuit would deal with that. And there are similar instructions for other situations too, like when we request modified work schedules, reassignment, and here's the instructions for determining when an accommodation that we've requested is an undue hardship. Once you get past the difficulty of trying to read and understand a template, understanding the rules themselves is fairly straightforward. Every circuit formats their instructions a little bit differently and expresses things a little bit differently. And each one is going to have some unique content that the other circuits don't have in their instructions. The instructions for the 11th Circuit include something called special interrogatories to the jury that are essentially a flowchart that walks the jury through the steps they have to take to make their decision. 1. Did the employee have a covered disability? No? Then your job here is done. Yes? Go to step 2. Step 2, is this employee a qualified individual? No? You're done. Yes? Go on to step 3. And so on. Some of the other circuits have these interrogatories too, but call them by a different name. Now, the jury instructions for your federal circuit are the only ones that are going to be given to your jury, but I still recommend checking out the jury instructions for some of the other circuits. As a basis of comparison, check out these sample jury instructions from the 5th Circuit. They're stylistically different from the ones for the 11th Circuit. To me, the writing for the 5th Circuit is a little more clear, so it's easier to follow the points of law here. But the instructions don't have embedded links, so navigating is a little more challenging. I just printed a hard copy of the relevant pages and worked from there. And the 5th Circuit instructions are also a great example of another way we can use these instructions. I think you pro se plaintiffs are going to really like this. Alongside the 5th Circuit's instructions about each point of law that the jury has to consider, there are footnotes that give citations to the case law that applies. That's huge. For instance, here are the 5th Circuit's instructions on what constitutes reasonable accommodation. That sends us to footnote 17, which refers us to several cases where what's reasonable was decided. If you're involved in a case about reasonable accommodation, these are some cases you may want to be familiar with. Now, you can find a lot of relevant case law just by reading the footnotes themselves. And the best part is that the case law you'll find in these instructions is current, so you won't have to worry too much about whether the case law has changed. Keep in mind that circuits are not identical in how they treat case law. For instance, the 11th Circuit may not recognize a case that was decided by a 5th Circuit judge. So if you're in the 11th Circuit and you end up using some citations that were pulled from the 5th Circuit instructions, then you may have to explain why those cases should also apply in the 11th Circuit. Of course, if the footnotes cite U.S. statutes or a Supreme Court decision, then you won't have that issue. For a while now, I've wanted to pull together some case law references that cite basic case law for various types of discrimination cases. And these instructions are the best source I've found for that information so far. By the way, if these kinds of case law summaries are something that you'd be interested in, please let me know in the comments and I'll get right on it. Whether you're involved in a federal court case or the EEOC administrative process, I think you'll find these jury instructions can help clarify some of the points of law that you're struggling to understand and help you build a tighter case so you can win. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, take care and hang in.